Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, the God whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. This is the second part of lecture number 5, the lecture that is introducing a discussion on the Quran. We saw it in our earlier discussions that the Quran is the Almighty's book that He has preserved completely, and it's arranged in a sequence. It has been marshaled in a manner which is substantially, significantly different from the sequence in which it was revealed. Obviously, the question is, why was it done? So, let's talk about the challenge that we readers of the Quran, believers in the Quran face when we read the Quran in a significantly different sequence. The Quran has given a hint. This hint is what we find in Surah number 15, Surah Al-Hijr, verse 87. The Almighty says, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ sab'am min al-mathani wal Quran al-azim. O Prophet, we have revealed upon you in 7 pairs, that is the great Quran. So, what exactly are 7 and what is meant by pairs is what needs to be investigated. Obviously, the Quran is stating clearly that that's what the great Quran is comprised of. Another understanding of the Quran that has been mentioned in the book on several occasions, but perhaps most clearly in Surah Yasin, Surah number 36, in the first 3 verses, is the fact that the Quran, apart from many other virtues, strengths, is a prominently book of wisdom. It's a book which, when you read, you are impressed by the fact that it is a wise book, a book that gives you lessons of wisdom. The Quran says, Yasin wal Quranil Hakim, innaka laminal mursaleen. This is Surah Yasin wal Quranil Hakim. This wise book, this book of wisdom, is a testimony of the fact, is a proof of the fact that, O Prophet, you indeed are from amongst the messengers. In other words, the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, was God's messenger. If it was to be proved, if evidence was to be presented for this claim, then the evidence is the Quran. And which Quran? Al-Quranul Hakim. The Quran, which is a book of wisdom. It's a wise book. Now we know that when you are talking about a book and you are praising its attribute of wisdom, then quite apart from the fact that it's giving teachings which are full of wisdom, it also should present itself in its totality in a manner that its complete presentation should also be based on wisdom. I mean, it's one thing that you have a book that is comprised of quotable quotes, but you cannot make sense out of the manner they have been put together. They're just coming together without any necessary wisdom behind them, haphazardly. The book obviously could be claimed to be containing messages, statements of wisdom, but the book in totality will not be possible to be shown that it's a book of wisdom. Because when we read a book, we look at not just its contents, different segments and passages that are spread across or the entire text, what we also see is how well those contents have been put together and arranged. So it's a serious challenge that we know that the book has not been arranged in the historical chronological order. It has been arranged very differently. What exactly is the logic behind this arrangement? Is it a book that is coherent? Do we find intelligent design in the manner it has been put together or not? You see, what exactly coherence is, what probably we would be able to know if we were to know what incoherence is. Quite often, a reality is appreciated more properly when we look at the very opposite of that reality. It's a way of helping understand different realities the Quran has approached. You learn more clearly about what a day is when you look at the darkness of the night and vice versa. So likewise, we find that the Quran talks about the plight of the inhabitants of the hell when it talks about the good time that the people of heaven are going to be spending. So, this simultaneous contrast helps you in knowing what the respective positions hold. Likewise, if we were to appreciate what coherence is, we ought to know what incoherence is. Incoherence is actually a series of statements in a text which are completely unrelated to each other. For instance, if I was to give you an example of incoherent statements, I might say, I hope that coronavirus finishes sooner than later. Who was the last Mughal emperor in India? I wonder what is going to be the year when next elections in UK are going to take place. My friend is very fond of cricket. Now, you come up with different statements and you start wondering, what exactly is this man trying to say? It's not making sense. All his statements make sense, but when we put them together, you cannot find any reasonable, logical link between these statements. So, these statements are incoherent. They are all complete, but when they are put together, they are not coherent. Now, when we look at the Quran and read it without deep reflection, but trying to understand its meanings, we quite often find ourselves at a loss to understand as to what exactly could be the reason behind certain verses coming before certain others. What is the reason behind one surah chapter coming before another? That's what the challenge is. Quite often when we read the Quran, we find that the Almighty is talking about the phenomena of rainfall, followed by historical references of the fact that there were nations who were visited by messengers and the nations rejected them and they got punished, followed by the Almighty's expectation from the Prophet and his companions to say prayers and be patient, etc. So, one passage followed by another and a third one, and there doesn't seem to be any binding link. So, people quite often, while going through these different passages that have been put together, they're disappointed. But obviously, because we all believe in the Quran as God's word, we settle with the understanding that it's a great book. Okay, we are not able to understand it. So what? We still have the privilege of reading it, and let's read it without understanding its meanings, because after all, we can't understand its meanings given the fact that we don't know how these verses come together. And on the other hand, I've already mentioned that these passages and these surahs were put together meticulously through an arrangement from the Almighty that were introduced and implemented by Angel Jibreel alayhi salam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, he repeated what he was saying, so that the Quran that we have got today is a different book in its arrangements. And I also mentioned the difficulty that a reader confronts when he reads the Quran, finds that there are Meccan surahs, followed by Madinan surahs, followed by Meccan surahs, followed by Madinan surahs, and it all seems to be not presenting a picture of a book which is particularly well organized. The difficulty becomes more significant when we present this book to non-Muslims, for them to appreciate it as a book that has come from God. Obviously, within Muslims there are people who are very critical, and they too need to be satisfied. What I'm going to do now is a presentation of the Quran and its arrangement in a manner that I will talk about the path-breaking research done by one scholar of the subcontinent, Mawlana Hamiduddin Farahi, who died in the year 1930, who through his sheer brilliance and the Almighty's blessings that he showered upon him, for him to be able to show a way to understand and appreciate the wisdom behind the manner the Quran has been arranged. His research was passed on to his students, one of whom was Mawlana Amin Ahsan Islahi, who in his book, in his Tafseer, exegesis, Tadabbur Quran, he explained in detail how the Almighty has, through His supreme wisdom, arranged the Quran in its present form, which really is brilliant, provided one is able to understand and appreciate what exactly are the reasons behind this arrangement. That Tafseer exegesis has been further elaborated by Mawlana Islahi's student, Javed Ahmed Ghamdi, and there again we find that this explanation is further elaborated. But before I explain what all these scholars have mentioned, there is one reality that I would like to put across. Realities that you are able to understand are of two categories. There are some realities, some truths which are obvious. You just need to be informed about them for you to be able to appreciate that that's what the truth is. For instance, 2 plus 2 equals to 4. I mean, you don't need to go very deep in trying to understand it to be able to know that that's true. However, there are certain other realities that demand from you focus and concentration. And it's only then that you will be able to understand, find out and discern that, this presentation is making sense and I can see what the truth is. I can see that what has been said is correct. The sun is shining out there is a reality which doesn't need any further evidence. But you have spotted the crescent, the new moon, which is very tiny. You'll have to show it to others and prove it to them. And the others will only see if they look exactly in the direction that you are pointing them towards. If they will look at the direction properly with full focus and concentration, they'll get a glimpse of it. And when they'll view it, they would know that it's a reality. But if they are not going to take it seriously, they'll not be able to view it. Likewise, are there realities in the realm of intellectual understanding. So, appreciating the coherence in the Quran is one such reality. you will start focusing on the manner it has been presented as understood by the people who have discovered coherence in the Quran, and you will be able to gradually start viewing it, appreciating it, admiring it. If you're not going to look at it properly, you will get no understanding of it. So here is a brief understanding, overview of what this claim is. In a thesis, a Ph.D. thesis written by Dr. Mustansir Mir in the late 80s in Michigan University, when he wrote his Ph.D. thesis on the exegesis Tafseer of Mawlana Amin Ahsan Islahi Tadabbur Quran, the title of his thesis was Thematic and Structural Coherence in the Quran. So the claim is that the Quran has coherence both in its theme and in its structure. The claim is that there are three different levels at which the Quran is coherent. One, at the level of surahs. Two, at the level of surah pairs. And three, at the level of surah groups. At the level of each surah, the claim is that all surahs, chapters of the Quran, 114, are one entity. Each one of them is a distinct entity. It mentions one subject. One central idea is what runs through the entire text of the chapter, the surah. Obviously, the small surahs can be easily understood following one theme, but the larger surahs are a challenge. And obviously, unless and until you are given proper examples to appreciate this claim, there is no reason why you should accept the claim. So that's what I'm going to do later. So that's one level of coherence. The second level of coherence is that the Quran has been arranged in a manner, the Quranic surahs, that a vast majority of these surahs, actually 108 out of 114, are in pairs, such that two surahs coming together, they are partners of each other in the sense that they are both serving one broad theme, one surah in one way and the other in another. There are only 6 exceptions to this principle. 6 surahs do not form a pair with other surahs. And the third claim is that the entire Quran is neatly divided into 7 groups, such that each group begins with one Meccan surah or more and ends with one Madinan surah or more. So the Quranic surahs are divided into 7 different groups of Meccan, Madinan surahs, such that each group has its own basic theme, style and focus. And all surahs are gradually building up the understanding in their own respective ways to reach the climax. If this whole understanding is appreciated, one would know more clearly what the Almighty meant when He said in verse 87 of chapter 15, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِنَ الْمَثَانِ وَالْقُرْآنَ الْعَظِيمِ. O Prophet, we have indeed given you 7 in pairs, that is the great Quran. But what exactly are the arguments is what I will let you know in the subsequent presentations. I hope you will stay with me in the next lectures, and inshallah you will enjoy and understand the coherence of the Quran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.